You know, when I was 13, all I really wanted to do was to make people laugh. I dreamed of being an actor, an entertainer, and actually I was well on my way to becoming one. I was up for this movie with Ellen Barkin and Robert De Niro. I got a call back, I met with the director, and they ended up giving the part to some other guy who had done some TV shows. I think his name was Leonardo DiCaprio or something. But I still tried to be an actor. I was on my, doing the gigs, the auditions and everything. But I started to realize that there were these problems in the world, problems much greater than I had been willing to admit or even known about. And those were beginning to eat away at me. I actually felt kind of powerless and started slipping into a depression. I actually began to feel much like Kadim stated in his poem. I began to struggle with my identity, with my sexuality, with my parents, with my place in the world. I really didn't know what to do. I wanted to somehow be a part of the change that I knew was possible, except I didn't see it anywhere around me. So a friend of mine brought me to the United Nations, and all of a sudden here I was, this huge organization I didn't even know existed, full of people whose lives were committed to making the world a better place. This hopelessness I had just a year or two ago suddenly was kind of vanishing, and I had this hope again. I had this hope that maybe something was possible. And so I looked around the room, and I thought to myself, you're all so old. Where's my generation? Like, I know that we have something to bring to this. I know that we have this imagination that Jennifer was speaking about, that we have this idealism, that we have this passion, that we have ideas. But I looked at my friends, and they all felt kind of hopeless, and they felt like they had no voice. So I saw this chasm, this opportunity, if you will. Like, if we could just get young people involved in this great institution, maybe they would actually accomplish their purpose, which was to create peace. And in 50 years, they certainly hadn't succeeded. So I did some research, and I found out that they wanted young people, that they had tried but never really succeeded, and I wrote a proposal calling for a permanent United Nations Youth Assembly. And off I set. I committed to trying to increase youth participation within that system. And as soon as I made that commitment, this wonderful journey began. The letter that I wrote evolved into this proposal, the proposal into a project, the project into an organization. And over the next few years, we built a network that spanned 180 countries, linking about 12,000 youth organizations and mobilizing 1 million young people a year. In the first 5 years of our organization, the Global Youth Action Network, we called it, we helped the UN create advisory councils, youth advisory councils for UN agencies, develop programs and campaigns, all of these things. But 5 years into this, I suddenly realized I wasn't making that much of a difference. I had all of these quote-unquote successes. We had managed to do all of these accomplishments. But what had really changed? I was busy. I was overworked. I was overwhelmed trying to raise $500,000 every year to keep this organization afloat. And I thought to myself, Gandhi said we must be the change we wish to see in the world, not create more and more organizations that advocate for those changes if we're not making them in the first place. I really struggled with this. I had no idea what to do. For all intents and purposes, I was a success. I had this big organization, but it wasn't feeling right. These problems that I had seen in the world only seemed to get worse and worse and worse. I knew that there was something that we weren't looking at, and I went looking for those things. And what I discovered are 3 obstacles to social change. The first are these power plays that are going on. And you probably know about them. The second are these money tricks that are happening that nobody really understands. And the third are these belief systems which convince us that we're different. We're different, we have these different ideologies. It's BS. It's a belief system. The problem with these power plays is what they're doing is they're consolidating power. They're taking power of decision-making further and further and further away from the communities that they're designed to represent. And this consolidation of power is what leads to corruption. And this is what's happening in governments. They commit to these goals and they never achieve them. They make these promises that are empty and never get done. Not worse than that, these power plays end up consolidating this power and then giving them to the wrong people. So governments are basically giving more power to corporations than to human beings. They're giving the power to create money that they have a right to banks. And what happens? What happens with all of that? Basically, you have these money tricks, Kimmy was telling us about how little money it takes to solve these big, big problems in the world. It's a minuscule amount of money, a tiny amount of money for these supposedly insurmountable problems. But corporations are going wild with capitalism. Capitalism, the unbridled capitalism, has basically egregiously and almost irreversibly damaged the environment and abused human rights, and has seemingly abandoned all principle in the pursuit of profit. And they've done so with the blessing of the governments who have basically created the laws that enable them to do that. You've got the corporations, the media. You heard people talk about the media. The media is telling a story, but the people who actually control the story are very few. They actually might fit in an elevator together. And when you control the story, when you have the microphone, there's a lot you can leave out. So I want to tell you not to believe everything you hear. You have to dig deep and find the answers yourself. And belief systems. Ideologies have divided us for centuries, but what generations have failed to see are the things that are common to each and every one of these belief systems. That we are human beings, first and foremost, all here together on this planet, with an amazing responsibility and a privilege to honor ourselves and each other and this planet, to evolve as magnificent beings and leave an even more wondrous place for those coming behind us. When I had discovered these 3 obstacles to social change, I was really tempted to basically give up. I thought, wow, I was doing so well, and then I discovered that there's these huge problems that nobody even knows about. Money. Who knows where money comes from? Nobody does. Even the bankers don't know how it works. It's actually really scary. There's a big game going on, and you guys have to know about it because they're playing with your future. You're in this game. And when you're playing a game and you don't know the rules, what's the chance of you winning? None. It's very little. So I actually got a note from a friend of mine. This is an example of what happens when you're in a game and you're on the losing end of it. This is $100 trillion note that's currently in circulation in Zimbabwe. Now, this might seem a long way away from here, but I can tell you right now that the same thing is happening to the dollar. It's just happening slowly. It's already lost about 40% of its value over the last 5 to 10 years, and it will continue to lose value. Do you know what it means if you need to get $1 billion to buy a loaf of bread? That's potentially the reality. These are seemingly daunting issues, but the problem is nobody knows about them. You have to educate yourself. You have to educate others. You have to empower yourself, and you have to empower others. Then you have to collaborate with others who also want to see this change, and believe you me, every single person in this room wants to see change, right?
Yes.
But then you have to hold the systems accountable, because the systems can do this to you. Instead of getting depressed again, I'd already been there, I decided to focus on the positives. In my work, I had managed to connect with some of the most extraordinary people I've ever met in my life. I am blessed to have the most awesome friends in the world, the Jennifers, the Kimmys, the Musas. I have the most amazing friends, and I know change is already happening. If you look at intersecting, you can look at intersecting trends. Basically, everybody's talked about media. Media puts this message out there that's really, really twisted. But the fact is, people are tired of the message they're getting from the media. They're seeking alternative media. Alternative media is growing and growing. Not only that, people are tired of being a passive audience. They don't want to be talked at. They actually want to be part of the dialogue. And you know what happened? There was a TV show that said, people want to participate. Why don't we give them that chance? So they said, you guys want a voice? You decide who wins. Do you know what TV show I'm talking about? American Idol. Do you know what happened the first year, or the first or second year? There were more votes cast for American Idol than in the US presidential election that year. But this is a trend. People are looking for these opportunities to engage. They're tired of the way things have been. People also want to connect. It's inherent in our nature. We want to connect with each other, with opportunities, with resources, with events. And so I watched the evolution of these social networking sites. I remember the first one that I signed up for was 6 Degrees, 6degrees.org. And then there was Classmates. And then there was Friendster. Now, Friendster became this huge success because they had managed to sign up like 600,000 members in 3 months. Something crazy. But what happened after Friendster? MySpace. MySpace managed to sign up like 50 million people. And then came Facebook. Well, Facebook is practically larger than most countries at this point, and probably even as large enough to be the 6th or 7th continent. This is what's happening. We, as individuals, look for where we have an opportunity to be heard, and we go those places. We are the ones with that power, but we don't recognize it. The messages are different. We feel apathetic because decision-making feels so far away from us. We feel powerless because these corporations are doing these horrible things. They're only doing them because we are giving our power to them. You have to reclaim the power that you have. You have to start digging deeper and asking the harder questions about what is really going on, because this game is playing with your future. This is your future. The decisions and choices you make today will determine whether that future is brighter for the next generation or if it's only going to get worse. And I can tell you, unless you start and get more engaged and educate yourselves even further about what's going on right now, it is going to get no better. This financial collapse that's going on, the environmental degradation and the climate change, these are all going to only get worse. But you guys still have the power. You have the power of choice. You have the power of commitment. I made that commitment when I was 17 and wrote that proposal for a United Nations Youth Assembly. And I told you, it sent me on this amazing journey. Well, I learned this great quote that has kept me motivated since, that goes something like this. The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would otherwise have never, ever occurred. A whole stream of events issues from that decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have ever dreamed would have come his way. So whatever you can do or think you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius and power in it. Begin it now. And there's one more quote I wish to share with you. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Sri Chinmoy Ngozi said that. And it's important for you to remember, because again, you guys have the power to choose love over power. You guys have the entire future on your shoulders, in your hands. It is shaped by every dollar you spend, every choice you make. So I hope you leave here motivated, inspired, hopeful, because when you leave here and what you do is basically going to tell us what tomorrow is going to be. Thank you.